All right, so now we're going to determine how do I figure out what the cosine of 5 pi over 4 is without looking at my unit circle or without using my calculator. So the steps are exactly the same as if you are finding it using degrees or if you are finding it using radians. So step 1 is still going to be draw it out. And this is the step where it will really help you to start thinking in terms of radians. So when you draw it out, since the denominator here is in fourths, you want to think in fourths, all right? So I know that all the way over this way here is pi radians, but again, I want to think in terms of fourths, so I know that's the same thing as 4 pi over 4 radians. And I know if I went all the way around the full circle, 360 degrees, that's the same as 2 pi radians. But again, I don't want to think in just in terms of pi and 2 pi. I want to think in terms of fourths. So this is the same thing as 8 pi over 4 radians. So now I kind of have in my head, well, I know 4 pi over 4 radians is here, 8 pi over radians is over here. So where would 5 pi over radians be? Well, I know between, if this from here to here is 4 pi, then I know this would be 2 pi over 4 radians. So this is 2 pi, 4 pi. This would have to be 6 pi over 4 radians, and then all the way around would be 8 pi over 4. So now I kind of know where all of those are. I know that 5 pi over 4 has to be over here in this quadrant. 5 pi over 4 radians obviously has to be between 4 pi over 4 and 6 pi over 4. So I know that this angle is going to be in the third quadrant. Your second step is, again, the same as exactly as it was before. Now you know, well, what is the, whoops, I was doing cosine, sorry. What is the cosine of the reference, oh, you have to figure out what the reference angle is, sorry. Jumped ahead there a little bit. So the reference angle, if I'm here at 5 pi over 4, this is my terminal side right here. This is my terminal side. The closest x-axis is this one going to be right here. So this here is my reference angle. It's the between the terminal side and the closest x-axis. So if this is 4 pi over 4 and this is 5 pi over 4, I know that my reference angle is pi over 4. Again, try to keep thinking in terms of radians. Don't keep switching between radians and degrees. It'll kind of take you a lot more time. So if you know that that is pi over 4, that would be your reference angle. All right, well, your third step then is to figure out, well, what is the cosine of pi over 4? All right, so again, if you remember your chart, you know that pi over 3 is 60 degrees, pi over 4 is 45 degrees, and I'm sorry, pi over 6 is 30 degrees, pi over 4 is 45 degrees, pi over 3 is 60 degrees. So this is really the same thing as asking you what is the cosine of 45 degrees. Well, if you remember your chart, the cosine of 45 degrees is the square root of 2 over 2. So now you know what the cosine of 45 degrees is. Now you just have to figure out what the sine of the angle is. And if you remember, you do that by thinking about all students take calculus, Alvin, Simon, Theodore, Chipmunk. We had already determined that this angle here is in quadrant 3. So if in quadrant 3, tangent is the only thing that's positive, therefore this cosine must be negative. So now I know that the cosine of 5 pi over 4 is going to be negative square root of 2 over 2. Now you did that completely without using your unit circle, but if you wanted to just double check to take a look at your unit circle, here's your unit circle. This here is 5 pi over 4 right here. Remember, it goes cosine sine, and the cosine is negative square root of 2 over 2, which is exactly what we had. On the next video, I'll show you how to draw out some more angles in radians. I think once you get the hang of that, it's really quite simple.